dumb.
It's not really important what color your dress is. What matters is the heart inside.
Well, I'm gonna be the very best witch that I can be, Mom. And I know having a good heart is important.
On this show, we've only covered one other Miyazaki movie, since it's rare we really do anything animated. And it happens to be the movie that Miyazaki made right before this one, My Neighbor Totoro, which we covered on episode 58. Miyazaki's fairly new animation studio, Studio Ghibli, was working on My Neighbor Totoro when the idea was pitched from group Fudosha to either Miyazaki or Isao Takahata, who had co-founded Studio Ghibli together, to start working on a film adaptation of the new popular novel, Witch's Express Home Delivery. Tonight we're talking about that film adaptation, Kiki's Delivery Service.
Kiki, mite.
Studio Ghibli had been founded in 1985. All three founders, Miyazaki, Takahata, and the producer Suzuki, had impressive careers before this point. Miyazaki began working on animations as an in-between artist, or the artist who creates intermediate frames between the keyframes, for Toei Animation in 1963. He worked his way up on several films like Gulliver's Travels, Beyond the Moon, and Animal Treasure Island, before moving to A-Pro in 1971, where he met Takahata and began collaborating with him on Lupin the Third Part 1, a 23-episode-long animated series, of which Takahata and Miyazaki would co-direct 17. Based on the manga by Monkey Punch, Lupin the Third is the world's most wanted gentleman thief and would get into misadventures and heists.
Why did they stop talking to me? Am I boring? Am I Italian?
An insanely popular manga in Japan. For Miyazaki, it was lack of creative autonomy that made the move to A-Pro necessary, which was a bit ironic as Miyazaki had never directed anything alone at this point. His series directorial debut came in 1977 when he was chosen to direct Future Boy Conan, a 26-episode-long series. In a career choice that we repeated later on, Miyazaki became a chief animation instructor for telecom animation film in order to help train the next generation of animators. A-Pro had split off into multiple subsidiaries, including Miyazaki and Takahata's new branch, Nippon Animation. They clearly worked well together and liked collaborating. Miyazaki's feature film debut came in 1979 with Lupin III, The Castle of Cagliostro. Continuing the work he and Takahata had done on the Lupin III TV adaptation. The most important collaboration they would have before founding their own animation studio was Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, which Miyazaki actually turned into a manga before turning it into a film. Both the book and the movie would be insanely popular, and Miyazaki and Takahata knew they had to start their own studio to handle the copyright. Nausicaa as a manga would go from 1982 to 1994 and span 7 volumes. Miyazaki would end up being completely overwhelmed by having to keep putting out manga volumes while also working as both an animator and instructor. By 2020, Nausicaa had sold 17 million copies in Japan alone.
Revive the giant warrior. Use it to repel the invading kingdoms and learn to live with the monster. Look.
An insect did that.
That's right, and whatever lucky man becomes my husband will see worse than that.
The post-apocalyptic eco-wasteland it takes place in was based on the Minamata Bay incident, where Chiso Corporation, a Japanese chemical company, spent a decade pouring mercury into the bay from their wastewater, leading to 10,000 people getting a neurological disorder from consuming mercury-contaminated seafood, which was termed Minamata disease. Critics would also see a strong anti-war message, and in a pattern copied later by Takahata a few years later, Miyazaki would completely deny and say he was only trying to entertain. So in 1985, Studio Ghibli was founded. Miyazaki came up with the name because he really liked planes. Ghibli is the nickname for an Italian scouting plane, the Caproni CA-309 Ghibli, the Italianized version of the Libyan word for a hot desert wind. Miyazaki said he felt Studio Ghibli would blow a new wind through the anime industry. Miyazaki was working hard on My Neighbor Totoro, which had started from an hour-long short film with the character Mei being based on his niece. It expanded out quite a bit from there and had 8 animators working on it over the course of 8 months. Takahata was working on Grave of the Fireflies. These 2 projects would become 2 of the most famous films in the Studio Ghibli canon. With Grave of Fireflies being called one of the greatest animated films ever made, Takahata followed Miyazaki's lead and denied that his adaptation of Nausicaa's 1967 short story about the cost of war during the firebomb of Kobe, was anti-war as such, and Totoro being incorporated as the Studio Ghibli logo and mascot from then on. Though Takahata and Miyazaki were both busy, Miyazaki agreed to become the producer on Kiki's delivery service while they searched for a director. Eventually, Miyazaki hired Sanao Katabuchi, a storyboard artist and writer who had written episodes of Sherlock Hound that Miyazaki had directed in 1984 as a first-time director for Kiki's delivery service. After 8 months, Miyazaki was finished with My Neighbor Totoro, and one by one as the work had been finished, he had been moving his My Neighbor Totoro collaborators to Kiki's delivery service full-time. With extra time on his hands, Miyazaki began reading through the first draft of the screenplay, which he decided he was completely dissatisfied with. He began making a ton of changes, including traveling around to cities like Amsterdam, Paris, and San Francisco, with his creative team to decide what he wanted the buildings in the film to look like.
It's right up here, Kiki. It may need a little dusting, but I think you'll like it. Oh my, it's a little bit dustier than I remember. If I weren't about to have a baby, I'd help you clean.
That's okay.
All right then, water and bathroom are downstairs. Give a shout if you need anything.
Thank you.
He also had photographs of buildings in Sweden from a trip he had taken there, trying to secure the rights to make a Japanese animated adaptation of Pippi Longstocking. I think you could probably guess where this is going. After returning from traveling, Miyazaki finally decided he wished to direct the film, and had Sanao Katabuchi take the assistant director's role. It's probably for the best, as he pretty quickly started to clash with Aiko Kadono, the author of The Witch's Express Home Delivery, who didn't want changes that drastic made to the story she wrote. In The Witch's Express Home Delivery, Kiki the Witch turns 13, and because of a custom for witches, must spend a year in a new town with no other witches to prove she can make a living. She heads to the city with her black cat Gigi and her broomstick, and ends up starting a delivery service. The book is 11 chapters, and each one chronicles a misadventure that Kiki has while in her new town. Miyazaki was looking to hone in on a very specific part of Kiki's story. He saw the gulf between independence and reliance, especially among young Japanese girls of the time, as the key to maturity and growing up. And because of that, Miyazaki wanted to heighten Kiki's misfortunes, adding a scene where she's attacked by crows, she loses her witch powers because she loses her confidence, and the final airship scene. This is what upset Kadono, who saw her story as being about Kiki's good heart that could overcome any crisis and didn't want trauma or heavy conflict in Kiki's story. Miyazaki and Takahata invited Kadono to Studio Ghibli and showed her around and revealed he was planning to direct the film personally, which eventually led to Kadono to agree to let the film continue.
Why don't you come up?
The film is about growing up, and how growing up leads to the confidence that makes a young woman into an adult. The 1980s in Japan saw an extremely slow but long-standing post-war cultural shift start to be noticed internationally, where the feminist movement in Japan was making real gains. By 1982, 20 Japanese universities had women's studies courses, and there was a focus on getting more women to be independent and in the workforce. Looking at Kiki's delivery service and all of Miyazaki's films from that cultural perspective is interesting. The extremely rigid gender roles, which has existed in Japan for centuries, lasted all the way until Japan lost World War II and was occupied. General MacArthur introduced the Japanese Constitution in 1946 and pushed the Diet into voting for it into effect in 1947. One of the biggest changes in the Constitution was the establishment of official gender equality, which granted women's suffrage to all adult women in Japan, as well as equal rights for marriage, divorce, and property ownership. However, the cultural expectations and norms for women still had most women in traditional marriages. Even among working women, 57% were married in 1982. In 1986, the Equal Employment Opportunity Law took effect, codifying various laws and protections for women in the workforce, including protection from discrimination, spelling out requirements for employers when an employee is pregnant, like time off for reduced work hours, and requiring equal opportunities for men and women. Also setting up a system of mediation for employers and employees who are alleging harassment or discrimination. One of the things that further affected these changing norms was pop culture, and Miyazaki was one popular artist known for creating strong, independent, resilient female characters in his TV shows, manga, and films, including Chihiro from Spirited Away, San from Princess Mononoke, and Sophie from Howl's Moving Castle. So I think it makes perfect sense that in 1989, so much of Kiki's delivery service is about a young witch gaining confidence and maturing into an independent woman through using her exceptional powers to start a business. Miyazaki also talked about how Gigi, Kiki's black cat familiar, represents an immature part of her. In the Japanese version, even when she gets her powers back, Kiki stops being able to communicate with Gigi because she's now matured. That was changed for the English version, interestingly. The budget was 800 million yen, or $6.9 million, and it became the first Studio Ghibli film to become immediately successful, grossing 4.3 billion yen, or $31 million. The first English language dub came in November 1989 from Streamline Pictures and was exclusively for Japan Air flights. In 1997, after Disney purchased distribution rights for Studio Ghibli, they released a second English language dub that's the one now seen on DVD and streaming, with Kirsten Dunst as Kiki, Phil Hartman as the cat Gigi, and Janine Garofalo as Ursula. The original Japanese version had Minami Takayama as Kiki and Ursula, Rei Sakuma as Gigi, and Keiko Toda as Osono.
Trusting your spirit, yes, that's exactly what I'm talking about. That same spirit is what makes me paint and makes your friend bake. But we each need to find our own inspiration, Kiki.